How bad can it get with Bitcoin? That's the question of this video. And we are going to look at on-chain data. We are not just going to make a random hype video, a random video about news. We are going to look at substantial data provided by the Glassnode newsletter. So every week there comes out a newsletter by an on-chain analytics company called Glassnode. And for this video, we are going to go through all of this data. A lot of very interesting charts. And of course, a little explosion here from the thumbnail. It's a bit clickbaity, but in the end, this is not going to be just random hype. We will have some substance over here. We want to find out who's actually currently selling and what kind of situation do we need to build up in order to turn things around again. Does it make sense to sell now? And we start off with the number of active entities. By the way, the link to all of those charts, the link to the newsletter, to the Glassnode newsletter, is in the video description. So here are the number of active entities, and this is a relatively long-term chart starting in May 2017. So we do have parts of the previous rally in here, and we see the entire crypto winter. So that's this line here in black, right? So that's the price data. And what we see in orange is how many active entities there are. So why entities? Why not wallets? That's because Glassnode does some kind of data cleansing over here. It bulks together different wallets that it believes to belong to the same person, to the same company. It does some magic behind the scenes. And so we see there is a lot of activity when we've got maximum prices, right? There's a lot of excitement. The news cover Bitcoin. And then when prices decline, when people get less interested into crypto, that's when the number of active entities is also going down. Now, what I find particularly interesting around this chart is that the number of active entities was actually higher in Q4 of 2020 than it was during this amazing bull run to 20K. So people see this recent top over here, the top or the double top formed in the last year, as kind of like disappointing, right? Like there was no blow off top. There was no real acceleration of the bull market. But when we look at the number of active entities, we can actually see a new all-time high over here, which already happened before those price tops came in. The price tops have probably not been generated by retail. It probably was triggered by very large corporate purchases. So we can see the price still continue to rise while actually retail, or the number of wallets, the number of entities went down. And at the same time, by the way, that's a topic for another video, the Bitcoin dominance went down. So during this sideways trading range, what actually happened while Bitcoin was trading between 30K and 60K, a lot of growth happened in the altcoins. So small retail moved their money from Bitcoin to the altcoins because the altcoins, they might have more growth potential. And so what we can see historically is that Bitcoin usually is a very good buying opportunity when nobody is looking. And the number of active entities is going down. Here, look at this. An historical low point in January of 2019, the price was also historically depressed. Again, a relatively low value here during the summer of last year. And again, the price was relatively depressed. Right now, there's still a bit of remaining activity left, right? But what I can tell you from experience is that a lot of this activity is just coming from existing market participants. There's not a lot of new people entering the space. When you look, for example, at social media activity, when you look at the statistics around YouTube channels that discuss crypto, the views tend to go down. But still, we are not at an historic low. So this indicates potentially we haven't yet seen the worst. This is not an extreme time by historical standards. And we can see a pretty similar picture when we look at the non-zero address count. So this is the change of new addresses, basically. How many new market entrants can we observe in a 30-day window? And again, we see when prices tend to rise, the number of non-zero addresses tends to increase as well, right? So more and more Bitcoin wallets get created. And then once the price starts to stagnate, the interest is falling. And again, when we are very low in interest, very low in activity, that's potentially a relatively good buying signal. And what we see at this moment in time is comparatively low activity, but still not historically low. So of course, nobody knows in the end where Bitcoin is going, right? This is all just speculation. But if you're thinking Bitcoin is going down, this is an historic opportunity, we might have seen the low, but the data doesn't necessarily show that there's anything extreme happening right now. If you're considering to buy Bitcoin, which is probably a good idea if you've got long enough of a time horizon, then at least be prepared that we could potentially fall further. If we look at related data, for example, the Bitcoin logarithmic regression, simply search for that, or for other charts on the website, look into bitcoin.com, link is also in the video description. We can see a potential floor at around 20K, which obviously doesn't have to happen, right? This is kind of like a worst case scenario, but it's definitely possible. 20K for Bitcoin is definitely possible. So simply get mentally prepared. Since nobody can time it perfectly, just buy regularly, dollar cost average in, and you might even feel potentially grateful for lower prices because you can get more Bitcoin for your hard-earned cash. Over the long term, Bitcoin rises, right? In the very long context, Bitcoin is limited. Fiat currencies get printed out of thin air, so the ratio of fiat to Bitcoin is increasing. Bitcoin is never going to go to zero now. I think that's pretty much an established fact. That was not so much the case here in the crypto winter of 2018. When this bubble here was popping, people really said Bitcoin is going to go to zero. It's a fad, and the final capitulation has come. It won't pick up any momentum in the future anymore. This is where we got the drop from 6K to 3K. We don't see that kind of a discussion anymore. Now it's just disinterest. If we just wait for long enough, then the supply-demand dynamics will take over again, and Bitcoin can appreciate versus fiat currencies. I think that's comparatively safe to say. Of course, no financial advice, but that's how I navigate this. I don't think you can make a lot of a mistake by buying today, buying in 1 month, buying in 2 months, and simply keep that position for several years. Now let's look a bit more short-term. Let's look at the current position of short-term holders versus long-term holders. So this is the current price here indicated by this black line. And we see most short-term holders, they are currently in the losses, right? So in red here, we see a lot of area, a lot of red area above this black line, whereas we see a lot of blue area here below the black line. So the long-term holders, they are in profits. The short-term holders, they are in the losses. And so your target in the end, if you're considering to invest a substantial amount of money, is to simply become a long-term holder, to simply ride out the waves. Sometimes time in the market can indeed beat timing the market. That's at least what has been shown time and time again in the past for Bitcoin and for any investment for that matter, also for property or for stocks. We've got 3 more interesting charts to come. In case you enjoy this video so far, consider subscribing because I publish videos regularly. Next, we've got the short-term holder, net unrealized profit or loss. So we look at how are short-term holders doing. And of course, sometimes these people are in the green, sometimes they are in the red. When they are in the red though, it's not necessarily the right time to buy in. This chart is even more longer term, right? This chart starts in January of 2014. In here, we do have the entire crypto winter, and we have seen short-term holders being massively in the losses several times, right? This was still a 70% drop from here, while the short-term holders were in the losses. And currently, we are at no extreme value over here, but still, even if we would go relatively low on this, this is by no means an indication for a bottoming. Short-term holders lose all the time, and just because they exit the market doesn't mean it can't fall further. Usually it stops falling once the disinterest is at its maximum. So once people simply don't care anymore about their losses, when they simply keep on holding, when they basically transition from a short-term speculator to a long-term holder because they don't care, right? When the disinterest is at the maximum, when the activity is at the lowest, that's when a bottom is relatively certain. It doesn't mean bottoms can't happen in between, right? But if you're looking for one indication to go really heavy on Bitcoin, that's, I think, a good measure. Rather look at the number of active entities than at the short-term holder losses. And so here we've got something that's a bit more refined. It's the long and short-term holder supply in the loss. Again, with a chart starting during the last bull run, including the crypto winter. And so we had our peak over here after the final capitulation in 2018, where even a lot of the long-term holders, they were in losses, right? In blue, we've got the long-term holder losses. In red, we've got the short-term holder losses. And we can see this kind of disinterest also by how little short-term losses there was at the end. Once we started the rally here, there were not a lot of short-term people in the market. It was mainly just the long-term people. The long-term investors, by dollar cost averaging into the market, they basically dry up the supply, right? More and more money is held by wallets that doesn't exit those wallets anymore. And so with less supply, prices can potentially rise in the future. And of course, during the Corona crash, we also had quite a few long-term holders in the losses. Currently, there is no such extreme scenario. We are pretty much at an average loss value over here. We've seen that before. We could go up from here, but it doesn't have to happen. Simply be prepared to endure potential losses. In the end, it's just a game of odds. We don't need to get the timing right. We don't need to get it perfect. If we are willing to simply wait for long enough, time is very likely to bail all of us out, right? Even if you bought here at the very top, which would have been pretty tough, right? Even if you had bought here at the very top during the last crypto rally, if you simply held on to for long enough, and it wasn't really that long, to be honest, right? It was 2018, 19, and 20. If you just held for 3 years, all of those losses would have been gone. And if you decided to even buy despite the negative momentum, if you decided to dollar cost average in, then you might have been in net profits already earlier than that, right? Because you take advantage of these lower prices. This is a chart that shows us now the potential bottom. It shows the long-term holder realized price. So the long-term holder cost basis versus the realized price. For what price do they buy? For what price do they sell? And when we've got a crossover here, we see the long-term holders, they have sold. They have basically given up, even though they're in it for the long term for more than 1 year. And when we do such capitulations, we do potentially have relatively good buying opportunities. We did have something like this happening in the summer of last year. Right now, we don't see this. The current level over here, by the way, is 17K. The actual spend price is 28K. So again, still some way to go down here. Doesn't have to happen, but simply be prepared. If you're wondering what I do, am I selling because of this potential risk? I personally don't. I just hold on to this. Over the very long term, Bitcoin is appreciating. It's appreciating relatively quickly, actually. If we zoom out long enough, right? And if we forget about all this crazy volatility, when we adjust for all of this, we can still see that Bitcoin is appreciating approximately 70% per year. That's 70% per year. And so I personally, I don't want to get out of an asset that appreciates by that much. I rather buy regularly and endure the volatility, because missing the next rally is probably going to be more costly than not buying the perfect bottom. You definitely don't want to over speculate. You don't want to over analyze. We've got daily market updates on Bitcoin and on Ethereum and altcoins. Every day there's a video for the exclusive community at thebitcoinstrategy.com. Feel free to check out the premium membership. There's also exclusive content. And of course, you can ask me any question over there. You also might want to check out last week's Bitcoin analysis. That's this video over here. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye-bye.